Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Studio. I'm super happy to have back in our lounge here, Erika Petrelli, one of our team favorites, is here with us. Welcome, Erika.
Hi, Christine.
And we are talking about something. We're going to be talking and listening about something called active listening. And I invited Erika to join us in this because she happens to be an absolute pro at this. And whenever I really need a session where I feel like someone is going to give me their undivided, rapt attention, she's the gal for me. And we can sit there forever. And sometimes I feel like I need to give her more of an opportunity to speak, but boy, oh boy, is she helpful to me in the process of just working through ideas, hearing emotion, all of those things that make somebody feel cared for, listened to, and engaged. And so I just want to thank you for that, and also give our listeners the opportunity to learn some of these skills that probably many of us think we're good at. And then over time, you start to realize that we could get better at it. And even if you were good at it, sometimes just our addiction to phones and social media and our fast-paced world makes us a little less good at it these days. So it's always good for a little tune-up. So Erika's here for a listening tune-up today, and we're going to focus on active listening, which means, because a lot of people say they're listening, but active listening, meaning when you're engaged fully in the conversation, you're showing interest, you're responding to the person, that the person gets the message that you intended, so that it's the speaker's responsibility and the listener's responsibility to make sure that that is a listening dialogue, even if there's not a lot of talking on one side or the other. So welcome, Erika, and thanks for joining
Christine.
us.
So happy. I love this conversation, so I'm so happy to dive in.
The thing about listening is one of those topics that everybody thinks they're good at, and yet can always point out when others aren't, right?
Yes.
And so let's just assume right now that we can all get better at it. Like, just assume that, because someone in your life thinks that you could be a better listener. Trust me. So Wright State University did a study on this, and I thought this was interesting. They found that listening actually accounts for 45% of the time spent communicating in the workplace, which makes sense. 45% of the time when we're communicating, we should be listening, right? But yet nobody is really taught listening skills in the workplace. Very few people are taught listening skills in the workplace. It happens to be when we train leadership trainers in our company, we start with active listening, right? Because it's always one of those like basis of how you can do well, not only if you're in the classroom teaching, but if you're also with a client, if you're with anybody in your life, it can improve your life drastically. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that only about 25 to 50% of what people hear, they can actually remember. And about 75% of the time, when we're in communication with someone, we're distracted. And that probably makes sense to most people. We are so easily distracted. Our phones are buzzing, our watches are buzzing, someone else is talking, we're thinking about our own things. But that's a huge amount of time, 75% distracted.
It really is. That means 25% of the time only can you count on the fact that the person that you're talking to is with you.
Right. And some people would say that might be even less.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope that all the loved ones in my life are listening out there. But anyway, everybody, when we also do, Erika knows this, when we go in and work with companies, when we make lists of what makes great leaders and what makes kind of bad ones, the thing that always comes up on both lists to some degree is either they're a great listener or they're a horrible listener, right? It's on the list one way or another. And so it is something that we just think should be organic and that we learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's not always, right?
No.
And recently I was in a room with a bunch of CEOs and we did some listening exercises, some of the basic ones that we also work on, Erika. And it was just amazing how much everybody left that going, oh my God, I need to get better at this.
Wow.
I need to get better at this.
It's so fascinating.
So what is your, you do it very well. Even now you're like, yeah, Christine, you're leaned in, listening to me, looking at me, reflecting back. I feel so loved. Erika, it may be that it comes so natural to you, but why don't you give us some of your I don't know, a story about when, about listening for you, or who it was that did this for you, or what gets in your way, or how you're good at this, anything. Just give us some tips.
That's hilarious. Give us your secret sauce.
Yes.
Well, the bad news is there is no secret sauce.
Dang it.
So sorry to start off that way, but I loved what you said about, it is not something that's often taught. It's so ironic because active listening fits under the broader category of emotional intelligence and emotionally intelligent leadership. So if you sort of take that broad category of emotional intelligence and you're looking at what are those core competencies, within that is relationship skill building, right? And within that is effective communication. And a subset of that is active listening. So you really have to be dedicated and committed to the larger concept of emotional intelligence before you can really dig in and get to that kind of pinpoint that skill of active listening. And so oftentimes companies, I would imagine, really do believe they're offering the kind of training that would strengthen the listening skills of their employees. But when in fact they're talking about the broader strokes of emotional intelligence and probably not getting to the brass tacks of what does it mean to actually listen, it probably just shows up as hey, listening's important, so be sure you do that better.
Right.
Which in the end, it's like, well, I understand that in theory, but on my very busy day, I'm going to forget it in practice every time.
Yeah.
I do feel like there is a part of it that does come more naturally to some people than others. Like every skill, if you put every skill that we could possibly exhibit in emotionally intelligent leadership on the table, we would pick up different ones that were more natural to us than others. And that's just because some of us work harder at ones than others. So it's funny. I do remember there was one specific moment that I remember the first time I understood that listening was one of the ones that came naturally to me, happened in middle school.
Oh my goodness.
Because I was sitting in the library across from a girl who was not a good friend, just a classmate, who was talking to me about something that was bothering her. And I was listening. And at one point she said, she kind of like clutched herself and she said, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable right now because you're listening to me so intently. I'm not used to that. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Because I was so locked in and leaned in. It was the first time somebody said, wow, you're really listening to me, that I thought, oh, wow. In her case, it was a little, maybe a little too much listening. But that was the first moment that I said, oh, listening is a skill.
Yeah.
And it's something that has an impact on people.
Yeah. Where I remember, I thought, oh, I'm pretty good at listening. That's how I always figured. And then there was nothing like having children to remind me that I need to get better at this, because they're the ones who more than anybody need you to listen to them, right? But you're so busy as a mom, right? And I remember just being like doing stuff. So I'd be with them physically in the room, but maybe I would be like putting away their clothes or like doing something of the million things that I didn't get to do because I was at work or was away, whatever it was that I was folding laundry in. And they would be like, mommy, 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 mommy. I'm like, what? Just say it. It's like, I'm right here. And they'd say, you're not looking at me. And then I'd be like, oh, and then I'd look at them and then they'd say, da, 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 and tell me whatever about their day. But it used to drive me crazy. And they're teenagers. And sometimes they'll still do it. They'll be like, mom,
Yeah.
mom. And I'm like, I can hear you. I'm listening. And they're like, but you're not looking at me. And what that was a clue to me was that just because I can listen to them and do something else, that distracted listening is not of interest to them.
It's not of interest to anyone.
But they'll tell me.
That is such a perfect example, because it's perfect, because anyone who's listening, who's a parent, understands exactly what you are talking about, that our children are relentless seekers of our listening. And oftentimes from our adult busy perspective, what they're seeking our listening ears for are things that seem superfluous, seem frivolous.
Right.
Look at me pull up my pants. Look at me play this video game. Look at me throw this ball. Let me tell you about my goldfish crackers. There's things that they're saying that you're like, I don't actually care.
Yeah.
So just tell me while I'm getting the important things done.
Yeah.
And so why I love that example is because if anyone, that may be our very first and best tip, is imagine. So for our child who wants to tell us about the way they've just learned to throw the ball, that may be not that important to us, but to them, it's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And so our job is to listen because it's their most important thing that they're trying to share with us. And so the same is true, it translates to the workplace. You may have a coworker, it may even be a direct report that comes in and wants to tell you about their most important thing, which may be of zero interest to you because you have on your plate something that from your perspective is more important because it's a different priority for you. But what they're trying to share is their most important thing. So it's a really powerful example to remind us that that's a very first tip in active listening that we should offer. When someone is trying to share with you something that's important, it's important simply because it's important to them. And so that gift of looking at them, which is the example you gave, says, I see that you're sharing something important to you. It's irrelevant whether it's important to me as well.
Yeah.
Because they're sharing it because it's their important thing.
Yeah. I didn't really know what some of that term was until we had a social worker working for us who I know you'll remember this, introduced us to the work of Donald Winnicott, who was a psychoanalyst who originated this concept of a holding environment. And this idea where you basically provide a space where individuals feel emotionally secure and understood, and that allows people then to take risks, make mistakes, express themselves. So people who've heard us talk about psychological safety in our first 2 episodes of this podcast know that psychological safety even comes from this idea of a holding environment. And that with young kids, you can see when parents and those first that are attached to them look at them whenever they call their name, hold that space for them where we're giving them our rapt attention, then those kids grow, feel secure, develop in ways. And we use this all the time in education and leadership. And even people out of Harvard, Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy, talk about this in their work in terms of how this types of work of Winnicott's in education moves over into leadership and leading teams and organizational growth. And so how do we move from that, like mommy, to like being like the leader of an organization and going, even though they're not saying that, that's in fact what everybody needs is some sort of holding environment based in these kind of very deep psychological
it's a human needs.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of our base human needs. Talking about some of the statistics that you were tossing out earlier. So on the other end, on the receiving end, I was looking at a study from Workforce Institute that talked about 85 or 86% of employees reported not feeling heard equally or fairly amongst their team. 86%. And more than 60% talked about feeling that their voices were ignored entirely. And so if you just use those statistics, more than half to a majority of employees are reporting some disparity in how they are feeling heard. So that does mean if we're leaders, we have to just assume that we're part of the problem, at least some of the time.
That's right.
And so this is another one of those with all of our emotionally intelligent topics, we have to assume we're the problem and be willing to look at maybe changing our perspective, because we can really hunker down and say, no, it's not me. It's them. I'll tell you the people that don't listen. Let me tell you about Frank around the corner. But we need to just let Frank worry about himself. We really need to look at ourselves and what are the things that we can do, because that is a really sad statistic that many people are not feeling heard in their workplaces,
Yeah.
Especially since active listening as a phrase or as a thing to do, that was first coined back in the 1950s.
Wow.
So since the 1950s, we have learned about active listening. And yet in 2024, it's still one of the number one things that people will cite as not happening or a reason that they don't feel psychologically safe in the workplace. So it's one of those things that, we continue to not get it right.
The good news of it all is really also that when people report that they are listened to by their bosses or their friends or whoever, they find that they report more often that those particular people are more helpful in their lives and actually give them good advice and give them good solutions, even if they don't. Like they did. I thought that was so fascinating that like you don't have to have the answers. Apparently you just have to listen and they think you have the answers because then they find the answers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Holding space, just like you said, people that phrase, oh, let me hold space for you is tossed around in more common vernacular coming from that more psychologically rooted holding environment. But the idea of holding space is another one of those easier said than done. So let me hold space for this conversation, except for then I immediately interject my opinions, my advice, my perspective. That's not actually holding space. So to your point, when somebody holds space and is truly just present and inviting the person to keep talking, when we're given the gift of somebody just sitting there listening with us as we talk it out. You're right. Invariably, we talk out of ourselves the idea, the solution, the feel better. We get it out of our own selves, but we'll attribute the success of our good feeling to the person that was listening to us.
Yeah. And I'm going to out myself here. For those of you who might suffer from a lack of patience like myself, sometimes that gets in my way. And if I add that to the fact that maybe the person speaking isn't, let's say, as dynamic as I am, or as I'm the people that I mostly surround myself with, I tend to really tune out on those folks. And that's exactly the people that I probably should be listening to, because they're often the people that have maybe more of an analytical mind, or a mind that can share with me something that I should look at, that's a blind spot for myself. And one time I was doing an interview. This is so embarrassing, but I know there are people in this room that bring this up to me often. I was doing an interview with someone, and I was brought into the interview process second or third round. So people had already said this person is good. This person had done some work, some homework that they brought in for us to look at. They were like an analyst, right? They bring in this stuff. And I just started tuning out, right? It was not my love language, so to speak. And I was just like, this is so boring. I can't possibly. So, and I'm in my office, which, it's a bit of a mess, of a chaotic mind there. And I was looking around my office while this person was talking, and I was like, oh God, I really should move that, or I should clean that up, or I should, and I was just thinking of all the chores that I need to get done in this office, to the point where a few minutes later, Erika, I stood up on my chair and started cleaning my office during her interview. And our employee was like, what are you doing? Like, she even called me out during it. And she was like, Christine, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm so sorry, but this bothers me up here. I've got to fix this. And we ended up hiring that person. I don't even know how she came to work for us, but I literally was like bored. And I was like, okay, this is enough. I've got enough of what I need. She doesn't have to report to me. But I actually got up, and how rude. Like, talk about the opposite of a holding environment. I'm sure this person was like, what is up with the person that runs this company? And to this day, they're like, oh my God, if you bore Christine, she'll be up cleaning, It has to be pretty boring if I clean. But anyway, how embarrassing. Like, when you're saying this, you just reminded me of that in the moment of like, ooh, but it's that need from inside, what's going on in my own brain, that makes me not just put that aside. So how does one take that stuff and just kind of put it aside to be present? Because it's hard to be present sometimes when others are.
Well, even just acknowledging that, I think, is so good. It's easy to listen to people that it's easy to listen to. So that's not active listening. That's just enjoyable banter. So active listening skills come into play when maybe we have to do some action steps to keep ourselves present. So I think that actually is a great story, because you might be like, oh, I have no problem listening to this person, but this person, I will immediately start thinking about my grocery list when they start talking. And that's why I think some of those most common active listening tricks and tips include mimicking, repeating back what the person has said from time to time. Because if I know my active listening trick is, oh, Christine, what I just heard you say, or I want to make sure I understand you said, if I know I'm going to do that, I have to listen, or I won't even know what to mimic back to you, is important. Now, having said that, I feel like, I don't know about you, but I've seen so many people that have, read an active listening checklist, and they know that, giving some encouraging mm-hms and nods, that's part of good active. Lean in and give some encouraging mm-hms and nods. But if you're leaning in and mm-hmm and nodding and not listening at all, it's not translating as listening.
Yeah.
What it's translating as is, this person is distracting and mm-hmming me to hurry to be finished, So it really is that patience, which is what you said. Okay, if somebody is lacking patience like I do, that's maybe the sort of parallel path or parallel training is, how do I really exercise patience in this moment? What are the things that I need to do to understand that this person might be bringing me something that I'm not interested in a manner that is in opposition to my style of communicating at a time in which all I can think about is the mess in the corner. Instead of thinking about all those things, I'm going to lock in and be patient and really allow this person to speak. But that's where I say there's no special sauce to that. You can't just say, okay, so now I've locked in and I'm exercising my patience. You have to think for yourself, what does that mean? What do I have to do right now? I think it would have been fair in that moment to say, dang, I don't even know. I don't even know what this person has said for the last 5 minutes, to say, hey, everyone, I just need us to take a quick break, step up, go get a glass of water. That gives your brain that wake up break to say, then you can give yourself a little pep talk. Christine,
Yeah.
Hey, lock in. So saying to a person, or I'll say to my son sometimes, and he'll say it back to me, because like we'll space out on each other too. And I'll just use the old, like, I'm so sorry, I just left the room for a minute. Can you say what you said again? I'm so sorry, my brain just went on a vacation. I did not hear what you just said. Just, so
we all
owning,
understand that. Yeah.
we all understand that because we all do it. What the problem is, if you've let it go on for half an hour, you've let a whole interview happen for half an hour, then it's harder to say, okay, let's just rewind that last bit of the tape. But to say like, oh, hang on, I'm so sorry, I just checked out for a second. Let's reset.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think that also there are some things that, like, when you say that to me, I hear what's happening. Like, part of it is grounding. Probably would help myself to ground myself before the conversation, right? Take a few deep breaths, a little mini meditation. We talk about it in positive intelligence. There's lots of like little mini where you can just, I love that one where you feel your fingertips.
Yes.
So you try to feel your fingertips, can sometimes just ground you. Sometimes I'll just put my feet on the ground, my hand on my belly, take a deep breath in. And I think that would help me. Even at night with my husband, when we kind of debrief our day, just kind of taking a deep breath before someone starts so that you can have presence in order to be present. And I think that potentially would be a good start. These are all actually, very good dating tips as well, Erika. In our last episode,
it's all relationships, right? Like listening,
all relationships
translates across the board. Romantic relationship, parenting relationship, coworker, friend, any human transaction is an opportunity to listen well. Any of them.
Any of them. In our last episode, I was with Blanca and we were talking about networking, and we were talking, how do you make networking not feel false or inauthentic or schmoozy? And part of it is that bit, the same thing, presence of like breathing, taking it in, not just like faking it. You know what I mean? Like really like, how can I be in this moment and find what is interesting about this person or the way that I can connect, or, how can I deepen this relationship?
Well, and in the examples we've been giving, these are scheduled talks, right? So if you're going to a networking event, if you're going into an interview, if you're heading into a meeting, this idea of giving yourself a pep talk, a listening pep talk, is really a good tip. I know I'm about to walk into this conversation. Let me remind myself, my job is to listen. My job is to be present. Let me do whatever works for me to ground myself. And so that is such a great tip when you're walking into a scheduled conversation, is do your pregame. Whatever your pregame is.
Yes.
Pregame for the listening. And so then the other part of that is, what do you do when it's a pounce? Somebody walks to your desk when you're in the middle, you're typing away, you're finishing a spreadsheet, you're locked into your project, and you see out of your peripheral vision the coworker coming towards you, the direct report coming towards you. This is not a scheduled chat, but it's clear they need you. Hey, do you have a second, Christine? For me, those are the moments where I and a lot of people stumble in our listening, because no, I don't have a second. Do you see? I have no seconds. I'm in the middle of something. I don't have seconds. Schedule a second with me. But so, hey, do you have a second, Erika? So then I think you have to be honest whether you have a second. Because if I genuinely cannot listen to you in that moment, if you come up to me, hey, Erika, do you have a second? And I genuinely know I'm not going to be able to give you my listening, then I need to be very upfront and say, can we talk in 20 minutes? Would it be okay if I finish this and we talk in 5 minutes? Actually, I'm just wrapping up this project. Let me finish. To be honest, because I think what happens is we say, sure, what's up? But one eye keeps drifting back to the computer.
Or we keep going.
What's up? I'm listening.
I can listen and do this at the same time. I've heard that before.
So not only we have not turned and given them our presence, we're still distracted, so we're not active listening. We're also annoyed at them, so we're listening with a flavor of annoyance, which changes the way we hear. So the one ear that is listening is an annoyed ear, so it's not hearing well anyway. So better to say, not now, but yes in 5, yes in 20, yes at 3, because that honors the other person as well. And, unless it's the next building over is on fire moment, and they say, no, it actually has to be now, people understand, no, I don't have a second. Okay, great. I'll talk later. Then you're both ready.
Right. And then we got to come back to them. All right. So let's go in these last few minutes. Let's give some tips so that you can tips on being a better listener. I would say the first one I would start with is, if you feel like you need to get better at this, or maybe even the people in your organization need to get better at, do some training. Bring somebody in who can teach some training where they can actually practice in a more formal way these things that we expect everybody to know, because it levels the playing field and everybody starts to learn some skills that then they can use in that kind of ripples throughout your organization. So that would be one, is just train on it, get a little bit better on it if you can. What's another one that you have?
Well, another important one is one that we talk about in a few different topic areas, but that's ask more questions. So part of listening is not jumping in with answers, advice, judgment, opinions, but that doesn't mean you don't talk. Active listening can include your voice, but the best way to use your voice when you're actively listening is to ask more questions. Tell me more about that. Help me understand that. I'm not sure I see your perspective. Can you say more about it? And any of those kinds of like, help me understand questions, say more about, is a really great way to ensure that you're actively listening. It shows them that you really deeply want to understand, and it checks you to make sure you're listening as well.
Right. Not just listening to respond, listening to understand.
Yes, exactly.
We have a episode on that, specifically on this, using some of those perfect questions as well on questioning. We talked to a coach that came in and gave us a lot of that. It was great. Another one that I would say is eye contact. We think sometimes that we're looking at somebody if we're just even facing them, but look at them in the eye.
Yeah.
And really, let them know by your nonverbal cues of eye contact. People rank eye contact very, very high in whether someone's listening to them or not, right? When they say, oh, how do you know that person was listening to you? Eye contact is always one of the first couple of things that's up there on the list. Yeah. So eye contact is one.
That's so
What's
good.
Another one, Erika?
Well, a general one is just slow yourself down. I think that when it comes to listening, many of us move at very fast pace during the day, especially we're in the workspace. But even if we're at home, we're sort of spinning in our own tasks. And a really important tip for active listening is to get it down to first gear, slow down. So whatever gear you're in, when there is an opportunity to listen, actively think about how you can slow down. So take a breath, things that we've said already, practice some breathing, turn your body to face them, actually just shut your mouth and let them talk. So slowing down, and just if I even just say that to myself, okay, slow down, Erika, like I'm getting in listening gear, which should be almost at neutral, if not neutral. It should be my low gear, which can be difficult for a lot of us.
Do you remember when you gave somebody cards that said stop talking? Didn't you give somebody
Probably
for you a card
that
said shh, just
oh no,
you know what I'm talking. No, what
I do know what I'm talking about. It was a pack of gum that said, how about a pack of shut the hell up? And I would just toss it at them at a meeting. How about a pack of shut the hell up? Maybe don't do that depending on your work environment, or maybe do. You know your people better than I do. But that is one of my favorite quotes. It's one of those, like, I think it was painted on the cave by the cavemen because it's such an old adage, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. We just can't help ourselves. We feel like the way to validate our presence in a room is to speak it. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like with active listening, it's counterintuitive for a lot of people that if I'm quiet in the room, doesn't that somehow devalue my presence in the room, when in fact, no, that silence can be the most powerful, profound thing you can offer the room.
Yeah, especially if you're actively still looking at them, present, nodding sometimes.
Yes, being quiet in the room on your phone is not, that's not the tip we're talking about.
Yeah, don't let my teenage son hear that. No, that is not active listening.
No.
Not active. He'll be like, I'm hearing you as he's
gaming. I'm holding space for you.
Yeah, gaming. I'm listening. I'm like, yeah, now I'm like, mommy. He's like, what? I hear you, with his little thumbs going away on that, machine. But anyway, the other thing I would say is there's this thing of social listening on the internet, because one of the ways that I think we can give back to that younger generation is that they are used to having feedback on their social media posts, on LinkedIn. We have a Facebook workplace, and I don't get on there as much as I should, but I know when I do, people appreciate it because I'm listening to their posts and commenting something. And I actually had an ex-employee who we work with now as a client, write to me and said, Christine, I just want to tell you that I appreciate your social listening lately, because I had commented on her posts, or I had read them, or I had taken the time, and I thought to myself, oh, how interesting. I wouldn't have even known that was a phrase.
Yeah.
But it made me think, like, of course, because when I look at my kids, if they post something and their friends don't immediately comment back, then they don't feel seen, heard, loved. And so maybe some of us older folks can give back to that kind of social listening too, when it's their way of communicating.
And I love that tip, because it's another one of those, back to the first tip that we even just kicked off the episode with, of that sort of holding the space for, if it's important to them, it's important. So the mommy, the social listening is a similar one, because if I expand my ears to what is important to, so going back to me as a parent, if I expand my ears to what's important to my kids, who are teenagers, 2 teenagers essentially, I might not personally care about that album release or that game release, but if they care and I'm paying attention to when that album got released, what are the songs on it, what are the new characters in that game, and I ask them questions about it, I'm socially listening, because that's important to this group of people. And me asking a few questions about it says, oh wow, I'm showing you that I honor that it's important to you. Yeah. And that is again that powerful gift of listening. So social listening, whether it's commenting on social media or just asking questions of people in your workplace or in your home life about things that aren't of interest to you, but that you've heard the world is buzzing about, teenagers are talking about, that group of people is talking about, it's the NFL draft. Hey, what about so-and-so? How do you think Kirk Cousins is feeling today? Whatever. I mean, you don't even have to really know, but if you know someone who cares and you ask questions because you've been listening, it's really, that's a really great, it reminds us to take our listening ears outside of the, oh, Christine wants to talk to me right now. That's the only time I actively listen.
Right.
To the larger idea.
Another one, I loved your one about asking more questions. And when we teach active listening, that's absolutely, I think it's the second step, right?
Yeah.
Quiet for a few minutes, listen to them, ask some questions. The other piece of it, some people are uncomfortable with, but I have found is really helpful and revealing to yourself as to whether you really heard someone or not. And that is to rephrase back what you heard. So, and it doesn't mean like you rephrase word for word, but you say like, I'm hearing that this happened to you, blah, 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 like you said, and that you then add a feeling, and that must feel that you feel this way. Like, is that right? You don't have to assume it, but you can ask them and they'll say like, no, I wasn't feeling that. I was feeling this, or, you'll start to dig down to what's important, because I think one of the things that I try to do when I'm in my best self, and I'm not always, as I've clearly outlined today, but one of the things when I bring my best self to those conversations, there's a moment where I think, how can I serve in this moment? And what does this person really need? And is it just that they need me to just listen to them? Do they need me to ask some questions that help themselves reveal what they need? Or do they need advice? Like, what is it? And only once I can rephrase back, like, I'm hearing that this happened and that this is bothering you, or you're frustrated by this, then can I really offer any sort of help.
It's so good. And there is that, I've seen that a lot recently, I think mainly in sort of parenting tips, but it also translates of that, asking the person up front, do you want me to listen to offer advice? Do you want me to listen to just be here for you? Or do you want me to listen to like rev you up and be your cheerleader? How is the best way for me to listen right now? Mm-hmm. So that, just adding on to what you just said, if I'm then paraphrasing back at the end, this is what I'm hearing you say, then I know, is this a moment where you would like me to offer my opinion or some possible advice? Or do you want me to just say, well, damn, that's a lot. And that's it. That's all you need. You just need someone to say, wow, that is a lot. Or do you want somebody to be like, yeah, you're right, that person is wrong. Sometimes we need
cheerleader.
That too.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's such a beautiful exchange in a relationship. If I could come to you and say, okay, Christine, I need you to be a cheerleader for me right now, or I need some big advice, or I just need to vent. Just hold it, then toss it away when we're done. That's all I needed. We don't need to solve any of the world's problems today. I just need to get this out of my insides and out into the outsides,
That's great. Well, thank you, Erika, for coming today and sharing this. I learned some things today that I'm going to try to practice, or reminders. Nothing's new. It's just another reminder or a way to try something. So I'm going to lead into this week being hopefully with the intention of being a better listener for those around me and those that I love. So thank you for being here. Thanks for being such a good listener in my life too. I appreciate it.
Well, ditto. Thank you so much. And what a fun conversation. So thanks for having me again.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.